so now we're going to talk about effects. This is a shorter presentation, which is why I'm kind of going through these pretty quickly. So we have, I'm just going to record some audio. I don't know. I'll record something from my latest film. Okay. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. As you can see, remember I was talking about it, like, this is not bad. We could play with this, and we're going to play with this. We're going to keep using this track over and over again. The first things I do is I just get rid of the extraneous stuff right off the bat, because who needs it, right? And the extraneous stuff you could tell because it's pretty much, it's a line, it's silence, there's nothing there. So this is pretty dry right now, okay? And we'll play it. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. Really dry. By dry, I mean there are no effects on it. It's raw. Nothing's been added to it or changed. So this is the deal. If you're not the sound person that's going to be doing post, just leave it dry. Leave it raw. Don't add anything. Don't say, oh, I'm going to add a little bit of reverb or whatever. Like, oh, I'm going to add a little echo. I'm going to do this and that and the other. You want to record it as clean as possible. That means no extra sounds, no distortion, no effects. Because it's your person in post that's going to do all that stuff. Because they're going to be able to make changes digitally that they can't make once you make the changes in the first place. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with reverb. Now, reverb is pretty easy. Okay, depending on your program, I use Final Cut. Final Cut and Logic are integrated with each other. That means that I can access anything from there. So, and then in here, in this menu, you would go over here and you have spaces. They call it spaces here. Okay. And so it was very simple. You just kind of add, whatever sounds you want to it. But not every program is going to look the same. You might use iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, Vega, Sony Vega, whatever. Whatever you use. Okay. They're going to look similar. This is an audio program I'm using right now. But it'll be very similar. Okay. So we're going to add some reverb. Okay. So here we go. Let's add some reverb. We'll do a very basic. Let's go with that one, I guess. All right. If you're new to this, I suggest just go with, presets and then tweak. If you've done this for years like me, you know exactly what you need to do with all these parameters. It looks kind of scary. But the nice thing is you can just sit down and go, oh, never mind. I just want, a church. Almost all of them have a church, right? So we'll have the church. Dry means there's no effect. Wet means it's super affected. We're going to go crazy with that. And then, okay. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. So that's a very heavy reverb. What it does is it creates a space for you. If you listen to it without the sound, you can tell that it was just recorded in a room. If you do it with the reverb, you could tell it sounds like it's in a place. It might call it reverb. It might call it spaces. They give you options, everything from a church that has a lot of reverb. That means the sound is just echoing, moving around you a lot, to something that is, maybe they call it, a small room. So it sounds very tight. And so play with those. I would say play with the presets first. And then if you're really ambitious, then look into what all these parameters mean. Okay. Dry and wet are important if you have those parameters, but not all of them will. It just means that, how much of the original signal is in there and how much of the signal is affected. Okay. All right. So that's the first one. So another effect you probably will be using is called panning. What panning means is, and you'll see it under stereo. It means left or right, or if you have 5.1 surround sound, you have 6 different options. Yes, 6, not 5. Or maybe you have 7 options. Or if you are lucky enough to do an IMAX movie, by the way, I'm jealous of you if you are, you have so many options. Okay. It just means if it's left or right. And very basically, what you want to do is have your sound, you can hear my dog in the back, have your sound show up where you have your character. So if the person's on the left, you want the sound to come from the left. If the person's on the right, you want the sound to come from the right. If the person is in front, they sound louder. If the person's in the back, they sound farther away. It's very basic. It's very simple, but it actually will help your film sound a little bit more authentic and also sound a little more real, and professional. So what I'm going to do here, this is I'm just going to do this here is a dial for left and right. You probably will just have a bar that just says left, right. That's all it's going to have. See, like here I have a pan. This is making it all the way left and all the way right. So what I'm going to do is I am going to actually record some changing with left and right so you guys can hear it, and that'll be your sample. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantos. Anyway. Okay, so what happens here is that you'll be able to see, you'll be able to hear that the audio is moving and you see the dial is moving. Your program probably won't do as much. You set keyframes probably in yours. But adding the panning is great. And between adding that and the reverb, the correct reverb, make sure that the reverb matches the space, will be a couple of ways that you can actually help with things. One more thing I'll talk about is volume. As I mentioned before, obviously if somebody's close to the camera or whatever, they're louder than somebody who's yelling all the way at the back. And for the very basic audio editor that's brand new to everything, you're going to use something, just use volume. That's very basic. Normally I use compression, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I did pretty decent levels here, so that's pretty good. But let's say you didn't. Okay, you're going to add something called compression. And what it does, essentially, it affects the volume, let's say, the gain, the output of your signal. It will make it louder. It will make it softer. It will take everything and kind of, you can put parameters to get rid of some of the noise you don't want, and then emphasize the noise that you do want. Once again, this is a very basic beginning to this. I suggest that if you want to really pursue sound editing, you look into compression. There's a really great there's great online courses on audio editing and things like that you could take, or books if you want to do books. I prefer the YouTube videos and stuff. But so once again, we're going to use compression, and it'll look different everywhere, but it will be called compression in like for instance in Final Cut. You go over here and you should just be able to, okay, oops. There's as you can see, I already have a bunch of presets that I have for compression. Okay, but there's my compressor right there, and it gives you presets. Okay, yours will have different presets, and then it gives you all these things here. Which these things here, it's the stuff that you got to look up if you plan on doing this. Okay, you're new to this. We'll just go ahead and we'll just get compression, dynamics, compressor, mono, and then this pops up. Okay. They'll give you options based on instruments or voice type. Most of us will be doing voices. I have a lot of options here: narration, natural voice. So let's say natural voice. And then, a certain pop-up will come up and it'll affect the voice. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. So compression, I would suggest when you start, just find, the closest that matches your person and then use that. Okay, and you will hear a noticeable difference. There are other buttons you can play with here. There's the output gain, which means it makes it louder. You have auto gain things. All these other things are things that are advanced. We're not going to talk about right now. Okay, but compression is pretty important if you want to move past just the basics. Okay, so compression, look it up. All right, Google it. The next thing we're going to talk about here is a limiter. And what a limiter does is essentially it prevents your audio from going above a certain threshold. Okay, so right now the gain is set at 0, but if I set it all the way down to like -8, this has been Lifeline. If you notice, all of a sudden it can't go past 8, -8. If you look down here, this has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. Okay. Like you can go ridiculous with this. There's no reason you would do this, by the way, but this has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. Okay, so why do you want to do this? The reason you want to do this is so you can avoid going over the limit. You can, if you have somebody that it's just they pop certain words or whatever, something just keeps it just loud. It just keeps causing, or sometimes when you have a whole mix, the compounded audio can make the whole thing clip, and then you have to sit down there and listen and say, okay, what is causing the whole entire soundtrack to clip? And it could be something like, you know, there's a car horn in the mix that when it's added to everything, all of a sudden the whole thing just blows up. Okay, when in music that happens more often, but your soundtrack probably wouldn't be as involved. You should be fine with 0.0. You do not narrowly, you usually do not want to try to go higher. Here's another example. This has been Lifeline with Mario DeSantis. Okay, you don't want to do that. You want to keep it as close to 0 as possible, unless it is something that you're like, I do not want it to be heard very much. And this is a very basic way of dealing with volume. It's called the limiter.